Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma Daf Nun Zayin. Today's daf is sponsored by Cheryl and Avi Savitsky and family in loving memory of Cheryl's father, Dr. Stephen F. Stein, Shimon Fivish Ben Israel Yitzchak, on his 40th year at site. He's missed by all who knew him. Steve was a brilliant surgeon and loved his family and friends and had a true simchat chayim that was palpable to anyone who met him. We're going to get started right now with our daf. We were learning yesterday, we got off on this kind of tangent about a shomer aveda. If I'm watching somebody's lost item, I find it on the street, and I need to return it. We'll get to all that in Bava Mitzia, when I need to return it, how I know, all that. But the question is, what level of shmirah do I have while I have that item in my property? So Rabba says, I'm like a shomer chinam because I don't get a salary for this, right? I'm actually just doing it for the mitzvah or because I'm a nice person, but I'm not getting paid for this. So of course I have a lower level of shmirah, which again means basic. I don't need to pay for gneva v'aveda. Okay, if it was stolen from me or if it got lost, all I have to do now, it's not all I have to do, but all I have to do is go to court and take an oath, which is not a small deal, but I take an oath that it was lost or it was stolen, and I'm exempt. Comes Rav Yosef, it says, no, you're like a shomer secher, and we saw some reasons why. I'm not going to go back to them right now, but you can look at the end of yesterday's daf. I'm a shomer secher. It's as if I'm getting a salary, which means I am expected a higher, now even though I'm not getting a salary at all, but we treat me as that, and therefore I get a higher, I have to watch it in a higher way, in a better level of shmirah, which means, for example, or the main difference is that if it gets stolen from me, I actually have to pay. Okay, I'm required to replace that item. I don't go to court and say it was stolen and have to take an oath. I just say it was stolen and here's the money for it. I have to return it because I'm responsible to watch it to make sure it doesn't get stolen. So now we're going to have very simple structure today, even though it's not the simple content, but the structure is very simple. We're going to have Raba bring two questions. Rav Yosef bring two questions against Raba from tannaitic sources. We're going to have Raba bring a question against Rav Yosef. Then Abaye bring a question against Rav Yosef. So in a sense, it's going to be somewhat parallel. Two questions against Raba, two questions against Rav Yosef. Then once we resolve the second problem that Abaye raised against Rav Yosef in a particular way and made a certain assumption, they're going to bring two questions against that assumption. And then they're going to bring one attempt to actually prove that assumption. And everything is going to be either resolved or rejected, meaning anything we try to do today, we're going to say, oh no. You want to raise difficulty? Not true. You want to bring a proof? Not true. Okay, not necessarily. So that's what we're going to do today. Most of the sources we're going to deal with are tannaitic. One or possibly two are not necessarily, or one we don't really know, and one is definitely not tannaitic, but almost all the sources we're going to bring are tannaitic sources. So with that, let's start. Rav Yosef Rabba. So Rav Yosef starts bringing a question against Rabba. Let's remember, Rabba says shomer chinam. Right? Lower level means someone who's watching it for no salary and therefore is required less shmirah, particularly they're not liable for gneva v'aveda. So here comes Rav Yosef's question. Now we're going to have both this source and the next source are going to talk about a very interesting element, which is, okay, I find a lost item on the street, I pick it up, I take it home. Let's say it's an animal or a ring or something like that. I have to take care of it, which, might require work like feeding the animal. Okay, we'll talk about when we get to Bava Mitzia. A rug, I have to shake it out so it won't get moldy. I have all sorts of responsibilities. And I have to protect it, make sure, again, maybe that it doesn't get stolen, maybe not. We don't know. That's the whole debate here. But I have to put it in a safe spot, all that. Now, and I certainly can't, do something to destroy it. Or be negligent about it in any way that would cause it, right? Like stick it on the edge of a shelf. Let's say it's a glass jar and I stick it on the very edge of my shelf in a precarious spot where then it gets knocked over and say, oh, well, that wasn't my fault. Yeah, I can't do that. So now the question is, at what point am I no longer responsible? I have to return it to you. But how do I have to return it to you? So if I return it to a place where you can actually see it already, then I'm done with my responsibility. I find its owner. I find that you're the owner. I return it to, a place down the block from you. You see, we make eye contact, I guess. It's unclear exactly, but I see that you see it and then I'm done. Okay, I did my job. Nigneva o avda. Now here, it's a very complicated source. There's two ways to read this. You could read this as, okay, we're walking down the block. I bring the animal, I leave it, you see it. already it's your responsibility to deal with it. But if it gets lost or stolen from that point, I'm liable. Now that actually makes no sense, because didn't we just say that it becomes your responsibility at that point? So the other way to read this would be these are two totally different things. One is talking about when I return it to you, as soon as you see it, it's yours. But if it's still in my house, and that's the way we're going to read it right now, Rav Yosef is going to say, wait, if it's still in my house, but if it gets stolen or lost, I'm liable. Now, this would only be true if I am a shomer sachal, not a shomer chinam, because if I'm a shomer chinam, I'm not chayav b'gneva v'abeh. So Rav Yosef reads it the second way and says, my nigneva avda, lav nigneva mi beito v'avda mi beito. Doesn't it obviously mean, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense, that it was stolen from my house or lost from my house, in which case I'm liable, in which case I'm a shomer sachar. To which the Gemara says, lo, mi makom shechzira. No, it really means if it was stolen from the place where you put it. Now, but that makes no sense. If I put it down, okay, I'll think of a better example, and it happened to me. I ordered a new telephone to be delivered to my brother's house. They were coming to Israel. I ordered it to be delivered. I get an email that says, we're delivering it today, and someone has to be home to receive the phone. I panic because neither my brother nor my sister-in-law are at home the entire day. They're only going to be home at 10 o'clock at night. And, what's going to happen to my phone? They're not going to deliver it. I can't reach them. I don't know what to do. So anyway, next thing I know, I wake up in the morning. I go to sleep because 10 o'clock at night is, I go to sleep. I wake up in the morning and it says the phone, was delivered. And they send a picture, right? This is classic, right? Makom Shiur Ena, right? There's my picture that says, we delivered this package to the front of your house. I said, great, they delivered it. I write to my sister-in-law. Brother was out of town. I write to my sister-in-law, did you get the phone? So it was late at night, but she goes down, she checks, she's like, there's no phone here. And I panic because, first of all, they left it in the front of the house. There's no gate in the house. There's no anyone could come and pick it up off the street. So I panic. And of course, my sister-in-law goes to bed and I think, oh no, like my phone is gone. I just ordered a brand new phone. How am I'm going to have to argue with them. I'm going to say, well, you said it was only if someone's there. But of course, they said you have to have someone there to receive it. Anyway, whole big thing. By the morning, she says, oh yeah, there were a bunch of packages and it was in there and I just didn't see it because it was small. So phone was received. But it's exactly this idea of at what point, where does the responsibility shift? And that's why Amazon will always take pictures and say, look, it's in front of your house. We put it there. We're no longer responsible. On the other hand, it wasn't exactly protected. We're going to talk about that in the next source also. What if you put in a chatzar she'eino mishtameret, right? It's exactly that case. So now, basically, in this case, nobody saw it. So, you would say they're still responsible. So now they say, so once you put it in a place where the other person can see, how could you possibly say if it was stolen from there, why would it still be my responsibility? It's the other person's responsibility. So Rabbi explains, and now we're going to learn a little bit about the reality of their day. What it means is if you return it in the afternoon. Now here really comes to my case, okay? Vitarte katani. And it really is teaching you two things. Vahachi katani, meaning the beginning of this source and the end of the source are two different situations, two different times of day that it was delivered. If you put it in the morning in a place where they'll see, let's say on their doorstep, okay? Now, in the morning, this is interesting, people are in their houses. I would have thought, sometimes you think of people, they wake up in the morning, especially when it's a society based on the sun. So, when there's no sun, you can't work, like all the sugyas about Hanukkah, they all go home and first sugya and bracha, right? Everyone goes home once the sun sets. So they work from morning, sunrise till sunset. But apparently in the mornings, now I don't know what morning means here, till what time in the morning, but people were at home more so. They went to work more later in the day. So if it's in the morning when people are home, then as soon as you put it on their doorstep, let's say, or in a place where they can see, you can assume that they'll see it, right? I thought Achirena means until you make eye contact with them, you see that they see. No, that's not what they mean. They mean if it's the morning hours and the person's assumed to be in their house, then you can just leave it and it's fine. It's no longer your responsibility. The second part, which says Nignevahu Avda, was talking about Hechzirah b'tzorayin. You bring it in the afternoon when everybody's out to work, which is when they delivered this, L'makom sheyir'ena, to a place where someone will see, right, but but nobody's coming in and out, so no one is going to see. So what if they can potentially see? It doesn't help. Right, they didn't see it, then it's still your responsibility. Okay, so if that had been stolen from the doorstep, according to this, and now it depends what time they brought it. If they brought it at 9 o'clock at night and they happen not to be home till 10, you might say, well, most people are in their houses at 9 o'clock at night. But if it was brought at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, most people are not in their houses at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then maybe you could have a better claim. I could have had a better claim. Okay, luckily I didn't have to make any claim, but okay, next, Eitive. So now we have another source. Again, a question on Rabba, who says, you're like a shomer chinam, you don't have high level, you don't need to watch it too much. By the way, just to remember, we thought that Nignev Avda was from your house, which then would have proven that it's shomer sachar. But in the end, we said it's not from your house. The whole thing was about when you return it, which had nothing to do with the question of Raba and Rav Yosef at all. Now we say, he's always going to be responsible until he returns it to the other person. Now it sounds like, okay, so that means I took in your lost item. I am going to always be responsible. Now, what do you think always means? Always sounds like it covers all grounds, right? My love, afilu mi beito, right? Sounds like even if it's in my house, which sounds like shma mina kashomer sachar dami. It means I'm going to assume liability all the time, right? When it's in my house. Now, again, there's a distinction between it getting stolen once I returned it to you. If you didn't see it, that's something different. That's not classic Gneva Vaveda. Gneva Vaveda, we mean from your house. So that's what they're saying. This sounds like you're liable if it gets stolen, if it gets lost. That sounds like shomer sachar. Now, what you didn't know is this is a Tosefta, and in the Tosefta, which they don't quote you, it's clear they're talking about animals here. And now we're going to say there's a difference between animals and packages, right? And immovable, right? Things that don't move. Why? Okay, think about, now what are we talking about here? We're talking about a lost item, okay? A lost animal, usually, how do they get lost? They wander off, okay? So that already tells us something about the nature of this animal, whereas if I lose my ring doesn't move by itself, okay? It doesn't wander. Therefore, it obviously requires less watching because it's not going to move on its own, whereas an animal, and that's what he's going to say now, I agree with you, though, when it comes to animals. In other words, generally, Rabbi is going to say shomer chinam. But when it's an animal, you have to protect it more because because it is a creature that goes out, and particularly, in other words, number one, animals move. Number two, this is an animal that already wandered from its house. Right? Think of dogs. Dogs generally wander from their house but come back. But this dog wandered and left its owner, and for sure they're going to walk away from you. So all the more so, you're going to need to watch it extra. Okay, so that's a unique law, which doesn't, again, you could still be a shomer chinam, but you have this extra level of protection because it's an animal. So those were the two sources against Rabba. Now we're going to have Rabba questioning Rav Yosef. Okay, you attacked me, I'm going to attack you. Eitive Rabba le Rav Yosef, Hashev. Okay, this is the pasuk by Hashev Teshivim, you have to return lost item. So it says Hashev, and li ela bebeito. Well, that sounds like, okay, return it to the person's house. Liginato, again, we're back to this topic of where exactly does it need to be returned to. Liginato ulechurbato minayin, if you put it in their garden, or you put it in their I'm trying to think of the exact translation for churbato, but some destroyed area that belongs to them, okay, meaning nobody's living there. Minayin, how do you know that as long as you put it in their property, that's enough? Talmud Lamar tishivem mikol makom. So, thank you, deserted building, okay? So now it says Hashev Tishivim, double language. What do you learn from double language, right? Sometimes people say, oh no, Dibra Torah Kelasham B'nei Adam. But other people have the approach, no. Double language comes to include something additional, which means any way you return it. So if you put it in a deserted building that belongs to the owner, or you put it in their garden, it's fine. Now, my leginato l'churbato, what are we talking about here? If there's a gate around it and it's locked, Hainu Beito. Well, that's no different than their house. So you don't need a source to teach you that. Ella, pshita leginato she'ena mishtameret, ulochurbato she'ena mishtameret. Shma mina k'shomer chinam dami. Sounds like you can just put it in their courtyard that's not protected, in their garden that's not protected, in their deserted building that's not protected, and that sounds like you're a shomer chinam because that's low-level protection. That's exactly what they did with my phone. Okay, what was bothering me about the phone was that they live on a pretty main street, and there's no gate in front, and they put it right by the front door, and you can see it from the front door, and you don't necessarily know it's a phone, but a small package. Sometimes, big things come in small packages. Someone could have easily picked it up. So, and I think that's so irresponsible of them, right? That's all that's going through my head. How could you possibly leave a phone that's worth a lot of money, just right outside somebody's house? So now they say from there we learn, shomer chinam, the fact that they're not so responsible for it means, right? Again, it wasn't lost item, but same concept. Amar lei, no. Let's go back to the original option. No. It would only be that you're no longer responsible if it was fenced in, there was a lock, somehow it was protected. There were guards there, you had a doorman, whatever it might be. Now, you did say, well, isn't that the same as the house? So what is this adding? Because the Braita was basically saying, not only your house, but as long as you brought it to some other area. Now, let's say they brought that phone to my house, to my sister-in-law's house, my brother's house, and let's assume that there was a gate. And what they do, they threw it over the gate, okay? Now, at that point, it's protected because, okay, let's assume it didn't break by impact, right? But assume it's protected. Now, they throw it over the gate, it's protected. But what? But I don't know that it's there because, right? Now, in this case, they took a picture and they sent it to me, but let's assume I didn't see the message, They don't know that it got there. Now, if they knocked on my door and I was home, or my brother was home, opened the door, took the phone, right? If you're saying home, it means someone knows it's there because they opened the door to accept it. You can't get into the house without somebody opening it. Whereas you could theoretically leave it in the courtyard without anyone knowing about it. So that's what the extra courtyard is coming to teach you. Yes, the courtyard's protected, but they left it in a way that it's protected, but nobody knew about it. And that's what it's trying to teach you. That when you return that lost item, the responsibility shifts to the other side as long as you left it in a protected space, even though the owner didn't know. And that's what Ginato and Korbato is adding. Kid Rabbi Elazar, as Rabbi Elazar says, to Amar Rabbi Elazar, Hakol tzorchim da'at ba'alim. If you return an item to someone, let's say you gave me something to watch, and I decide to return it to you, and you don't know that I returned it to you and I put it in your courtyard. That's not good enough. But specifically, when it comes to returning lost items, though, in that case, I'm allowed to do it without you knowing. How does he get this? Because in the Torah, it says hashev teshivim multiple times. That teaches you can return it much more easily than you can return other things. And it's because we have this mitzvah, we want you to return things, we want to make it easier for you to return them, and therefore that's considered returning. Okay, so those were we said 2 questions against Rabba. Now we did our first question against Rav Yosef, and we resolved it because in the end, we said this source is not talking about a low-level shmirah that I can leave it in a place that's not protected. No. And that proved, and then basically it doesn't go against me. I can explain it in a way that it works with shomer sachar, high-level shmirah, because we're talking about I returned it to a place where it's protected. It's just that you didn't know about it. That's something different. Next source. Now, instead of Rabba questioning, Abaye question. Amar Abaye Rav Yosef. So he starts off with saying, you don't really believe that someone who's watching a lost item is like a shomer chinam? Why not? Should be. And here's the one source we Zoom drop for a minute. Now we're back. Let's go back for a quick minute. So what we said here was that Abaye is now questioning Rav Yosef and saying, how could you not say that a shomer aveda is like a shomer chinam? Didn't Rabbi Chiya bar Abba say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan? And here I said, I don't know if it got caught or not on the recording, but, or if you heard it, those who are alive, but what is he? This one is an Emorah speaking, not a tannaitic source. Okay, this is the one that's not a tannaitic source. Now he comes and he's going to basically say it's like a shomer chinam. Hato'en ta'anat ganav ba'aveda. Okay, first we have to go back and learn what a to'en ta'anat ganav is. To'en ta'anat ganav means, in a usual case of shmirah, I'm a shomer chinam. I'm watching it for free. I can go to court and claim it was stolen, and I have to swear. We mentioned this in the beginning of class. I have to take an oath. Now, when I take this oath, I say, I swear that this was stolen from me. If it turns out I lied, then what happens? Well, let's say I didn't lie. So if I didn't lie, I pay nothing. Now, if you don't know I lied, then I also pay nothing. So I basically pay nothing and I keep the item in my house. So I'm now a thief. Now, what happens when it turns out that we find out that I stole it and you come to my house and you find it sitting in my living room, then what happens? I have to pay kefel because I'm a robber, right? This is called theft. Now, the thing you have to know here is there's a difference between geneva and gzela. If you steal it in front of someone in a very open manner, then, or you come during the day where the assumption is people can see you, we'll get into all the differences in geneva and gzela. There's no kefel payment. You don't pay double. You just return the item that you stole. Okay, so there's a huge difference between the two. There is no kefel. Kefel is only by geneva. So if I'm to'en ta'anat ganav, and then it turns out a to'en ta'anat ganav means I claimed it was stolen and it wasn't really, and we find out that I lied under oath, I have to pay kefel now to the original owner because I basically stole. If you're to'en ta'anat ganav ba'aveda, if I'm watching someone's aveda and I'm to'en ta'anat ganav, mishalem tashlumei kefel. Now this would prove that I'm a shomer chinam because in order to have the kefel payment, what has to happen? I have to exempt myself from payment by claiming it was stolen and then find out I lied. If I claimed it was stolen and I'm a shomer sachar, then what happens? I pay right away. I don't get exempt. The only reason I'm paying kefil here is because I was exempt from payment. I lied. I was exempt from payment. I really stole it. I didn't give you the money for it. And now turns out I lied and I stole it and I pay you the money. But if I already paid you the value of it, now it's not the right thing to do, but I don't have a kefil payment. First of all, it's in the realm of gzela where there is no kefil, and I claimed it was stolen. I paid you the money, so that's what we're going to read right now. Rav Yosef, you said it's shomer sachar. If you're going to claim this is shomer sachar, amay mishalem tashlumei kefil. Karnabay shalume. Forget tashlumei kefil, because the moment I claim in court that it was stolen, first of all, I don't have to take an oath even. I pay you the value of the item. So now it's not an appropriate thing to do, but that's not theft because it is wrong, but I gave you the value of it, which means I don't incur a kefil payment when we find out I lied. So that seems to go against you. Well, we have to find a case. And this is what Rav Yosef is going to explain. I was talking about a unique case. We have to find a case. The whole problem here is if I'm a shomer sachar and I claim it was stolen, I already paid. And therefore, there's no kefil payment when it turns out I lied because I paid the value of the item. We have to find a case where I claim it was stolen and I don't have to pay. Now, what would that be? Well, it would have to be, okay, we're going to talk it. Well, we'll see right now. We'll read it inside. I came to court and I claimed that guys came to my house with guns, put guns to my head, and forced me to give them the item. Now, that's already onus. Now, if you remember, you're not chayav an onus. That's forced robbery, okay? Forced robbery, I can claim as a shomer sachar, and I can get exempt. And then the assumption is that because I'm exempt, when it turns out I stole it, I would have to pay the kefil because I then stole it. So then the Gemara says, or Abaye says back to him, that's not a good answer. Amarle, listim mizuyan gazlanhu. Listim mizuyan is a gazlan, and there is no kefil payment by gazlan. So if I claim, as when I claim ta'anat ganav that it was stolen, and it turns out it was me who stole it, then I have to pay. I incur kefil payment. If I claim, let's just go through the three options. If I claim it was stolen from me and I'm a shomer sachar, right? I have to pay, and once I pay, I don't incur kefil. But also, I don't incur kefil even if I claim it was stolen with armed robbery, and then it turns out it wasn't. Well, my claim is not to'en ta'anat ganav, for which I do kefil. It's to'en ta'anat listim zuyan, which, while it's true I'm exempt from payment when I lie and say that, I don't have to pay, but I don't incur kefil because my whole claim was based on armed robbery. And armed robbery, you don't pay kefil for, okay? Because they came blatantly and clearly and visually, everyone could see them, and they have no, they don't pay kefil, okay? That's the whole thing we'll get into later, but that's the fact. There's no kefil. So in to'en ta'anat listim zuyan, there shouldn't be kefil. And now we're going to get to Rav Yosef's answer, which is going to open a whole big Pandora's box and a whole big what? Okay, and questions against him, and then an attempt to prove it. Okay, this is the second part of today's sugya. So to resolve this question definitively, he says no. Shani omer listim mizuyan. If it's armed robbers, because they hide from people, it's like a ganav. What does a ganav do? Sneaks in the middle of the night when nobody sees him. That's a ganav, and that kind of person has to pay kefil. A gazlan usually comes in broad daylight and steals something with, their brute force, with they're scary, and they mug you. Okay. Now they come and say, well, if they do it with weapons, and whatever that might be in those days, but since they hide from people, and they hide from people, so one, you could say they put on face masks often. That's also hidden. Also, once they rob the stuff, they go into hiding. They're worried they're going to get caught. So they go into hiding because they did it in broad daylight and everybody knows what they look like. So they hide ultimately. That already puts them in the category of a ganav, which means that there is kefel for armed robbers, which means that if you're to'enta not armed robbery, you claim that it was stolen in an armed robbery incident and you lied, you would incur the kefel payment. So we're finding something that's sort of like, it's sort of not like Geneva, because a shomer sachar is going to be exempt from it because basically it's onus. On the other hand, it is like Geneva in the sense that there's kefel. And now we found some unique case that Rav Yosef could explain this source as talking about. Okay, again, what was the source? Okay, it's Rabbi Yochanan who said, To'en ta'anak ganav mishalem tashlume kefel, in an Aveda case. How could you possibly have that? If you view him as a shomer chinam, it's very easy, any ganav. But if you view it as a shomer sachar, you could say in the list of Mizuyan case, there would be kefel and the person would be exempt from payment, even though they're a shomer sachar. So now, as I said, we're going to go off 2 difficulties with this assumption of Rav Yosef and 1 attempt to prove it. And everything is going to be rejected. Both the difficulties will be resolved and the attempt to prove it will be rejected in 3 ways. So now moving to Amud Ben. Now we quote the source, which we don't really know the context of. And in fact, Rashi tells us, Matniti, it is a braita, but lo yadana hechatanya, but I have no idea where this braita comes up. And I think what he means is, because often braitot just appear and they're not necessarily anywhere in Shas, I assume what he means is I'm not even sure what the context of this is, because we just have like a snippet from it. So we're not going to bother dealing with the content too much, just about the words that are significant to us, because we don't really know what the context, I mean, not the content, we will deal with the content, what the context is, we don't know. So now it says, lo, no, it's not true. Okay, we're obviously mid-sentence. Im amarta b'shomer chinam shekem mishalem tashlum kefel, tomer b'shomer sachar she'eno mishalem tashlum kefel. We're now going to say that there's some stringency by a shomer chinam that isn't by a shomer sachar. Usually a shomer sachar has a higher level and, there's stringencies by a shomer sachar. But now we're going to say, no, shomer chinam actually has something that a shomer sachar doesn't, which is what? Shomer chinam, you pay kefel. That's what we've been talking about, right? If you claim it was stolen and you lied, then you have to pay kefel because you were exempting yourself from payment, and then you basically incur the double payment when you stole it. But a shomer sachar doesn't pay kefel. If a shomer sachar claims it was stolen, they already pay the value of the item, and then when it turns out they stole it, they're not required to pay kefel. Now, we know where this is going because isal kadatach listim mezuyan ganavu. Now, we finished the source already, even though, again, we don't know the context, but they were basically comparing shomer chinam to shomer sachar and made an assumption about shomer sachar that there's no kefel payment. Now, we just said there could be a kefel payment in the shomer sachar case if they claim listim mezuyan. So, isa kadatach listim mezuyan ganavu. If you're going to claim, like you just did, Rav Yosef, to answer the question against Abaye, that listim mezuyan is like a ganav that it would incur a kefel payment, then nimtza shomer sachar mishalem tashlum kefel b'to'en tanat listim mezuyan. Then exactly what we just said would be true, and that source wouldn't be correct. Because a shomer sachar who claims it was stolen from me by armed robbery, okay, would then, when it turns out they lied, would have to pay kefel, because a listim mezuyan would have to pay kefel, so the to'en tanat listim mezuyan would have to pay kefel, which means that can't be true, because this says, shomer sachar, we assume it means, right, never pays kefel. Amalei, haki kamma. He says, no. Why do you assume it means a shomer sachar never pays? Maybe it doesn't mean never, just usually doesn't pay. That's the way we're going to read it. Lo, im amarta b'shomer chinam, let's go back to the source. If you're going to say b'shomer chinam, shekem mishalem tashlum kefel, bechol ta'anotav, in every situation where he claims theft, he's going to have to pay kefel, because again, he's always exempt from Geneva. So any kind of Geneva, any kind of theft claim, if I lie under oath and say, oh, it was stolen from me and it wasn't, I'll have to pay kefel. But shomer sachar is more lenient in this way. She'eno mishalem tashlum kefel ela b'to'en tanat listim mezuyan. Rav Yosef says, how can I read this? Very easily. I would say a shomer sachar doesn't pay kefel except for in a unique case where he claims that it was armed robbery. Okay, and then that doesn't go against him because it didn't say everywhere it never has to pay kefel. And then we resolve it, because in most cases of Geneva, you wouldn't pay kefil, because again, a shomer sachar who claims theft would have to pay. And once you pay, then you don't incur a kefil payment. Eitive, second question against Rav Yosef's assumption about the listim. Again, we're no longer back to the original question against him. How could you say it's a shomer sachar? But based on the way he resolved the previous, that a shomer sachar listim mizuyan is like a ganav, and a to'en tanat listim mizuyan would have to pay kefil, right? In that way, it's like a ganav. That we're having problems with. So eitive. Now we're talking about a shoel. What do we know about a shoel? This is all practice for when we get to Dine Shomrim in Bava Metzia and laws of lost items. Okay, second chapter and then third chapter of Bava Metzia. If you're a shoel, you borrow something, which means, number one, you get to use it, which is not like a shomer chinam and a shomer sachar who can't use the item at all. They just have to protect it. It's similar to a socher, because the socher, the renter, gets to use the item, but the socher has to pay for it, and the shoel gets it for free. So the shoel has all the benefits. Because they have all the benefits, they're also liable, and particularly the Torah actually only says they're liable in a case of onus. Okay, if something happens to the item, which is unexpected, they actually have to compensate the owner. Okay, so if I borrow your car and it crashes, okay, while I borrowed it, I'm obviously responsible. Okay, I have to pay you back. I mean, obviously, we all know that's a complicated situation. It's why people don't like to lend their cars to people. But you're going to make your friend pay for your car because they borrowed it to drive it to the store, But on the other hand, according to law, Jewish law, shoel, yes, you borrowed it. You didn't pay me any money. Of course, you have to replace it. Now, vinishbar omet. Okay, that's what the Torah says. If it breaks or it dies, that would be like, if the car broke down, and this, by the way, that wouldn't be like you. If the car broke down while you were using it, you would actually be responsible for it. Ainli ela shvura umeta. Now, the Torah only talks about that kind of case, honest. Geneva v'aveda minayin. How do you know that if it was stolen, the shoel has to pay? Now, this is just simple logic, and that's what they're going to say. They're going to call it kal v'chomer, amarta kal v'chomer, right? If you're chayav and onsim, obviously, and you're more responsible than the shoel, than the shomer chinam and shomer sachar, then obviously you're going to have to pay for Geneva v'aveda, and that's what they're going to say here. And they're going to compare it to a shomer sachar. Now, let's pay attention. Ma shomer sachar shepatar bo shvura umeta. Sorry, not a shomer chinam. The shomer chinam doesn't have to pay for Geneva v'aveda. You would have to learn it from a shomer sachar who does have to pay. So ma shomer sachar shepatar bo shvura umeta, you're exempt from onus, and yet chayav b'gneva v'aveda, and yet is liable if it gets stolen. So shoel shechayav b'shvura umeta, a shoel who has to pay for onus, right? If it breaks or dies, right? We're talking about an animal, let's say. Wouldn't it be obvious that you're liable if it gets stolen? Now, that in and of itself, okay, doesn't say anything, but now they add the following words, which are the critical words here. This is a kavachomer that no one can argue against. Now, now wait a minute. They're going to come and say, we're trying to say that shomer sachar, you're liable, right? You're not liable in onus, and yet you're liable in this. So obviously a shoel, if he is liable for onus, he's going to be liable for all these things. But we're going to find something that's stricter based on what Rav Yosef said, that listim mizuyan is a ganav, is stricter for a shomer sachar than for a shoel, for a borrower. And if it's stricter for the borrower, right, than the borrower, then this kavachomer falls out, because we're now going to say, wait, we wanted to say shomer sachar is more lenient than a shoel. But now we're going to say, wait, but there's one element, one area where a shomer sachar is going to have to pay something that a shoel won't. What is that? That's our case. Let's read it. If you're going to say listim mizuyan is like a ganav, and there's a kefil payment associated with it because they hide at some point, then why is there no difficulty with this kavachomer? You could question and say the following. Wait a minute. Let's go through the case. I claim listim mizuyan. Now, if I'm a shoel and I claim that robbers came, put a gun to my head, and forced me to give them the item, do I have to pay? Yes, because I'm liable in onus. So that means I would pay. Let's say I lied. What would happen? Well, since I already paid the value of the item, I'm not a thief, and therefore I don't pay kefil. So I basically would pay 1 times the item. Let's take the same case with the shomer sachar. If I claim robbers came, put a gun to my head, and stole the item, and I was lying, when I say it, I'm exempt from payment because that's onus. I don't have to pay. But when I find out that I lied, I have to pay kefel, double the amount, according to Rav Yosef, the answer he gave to Abaye. So basically, I'd have to pay double the amount. That's a chomer and shomer sachar against shomer chinam. So that's what they're going to say. That's a good way you can knock out this kavah chomer, because there is some situation where there's a chumrah, and therefore your kavah chomer falls down. Amar lei says, no, that's not true. That's not a chumrah. Why not? Well, what's it based on? Why is the shoel exempt from to'en tanat listim mizuyan and exempt from the double payment? Because they incur payment immediately, right? As soon as I claim I borrowed your car, and then I say, listen, robbers came with a gun, put a gun to my head and stole the car, I have to actually pay the value of the car because that's onus and I'm chayav in onus. So comes the Gemara and says, Amalei, or Rav Yosef says, Hasavar Hai Tana, this Tana believes, which means maybe not everyone believes this, but this Tana believes, Karna below Shvua Adifa Mikvela B'Shvua. Let's go through the situation. We wanted to say, in a certain situation, a shomer sachar could pay double, and that same, right? And the shoel would only pay one time. Now, when does the shoel pay one time? Anytime some onus happens to the item, they pay the value. Okay, that's going to happen all the time. That's without a shvua, right? I don't take any oath. Just something happens to it, I have to pay you. That is much more chamor than a unique case where I would have to lie in court and say that armed robbers came, put a gun to my head, and stole it. And then if they find out it's true, I'll have to incur a double payment. But that's such a rare occurrence that even though, yes, it's true, there's double versus single, but since the single payment gets instituted, it basically kicks in right away anytime it gets stolen, or I claim it gets stolen, or something happens to it, or some onus happens, I'm going to have to pay without any sort of oath. That's already more chamor, even though I might in the end, in a unique case with the shomer sachar, pay double, but that's only if I take a false oath. And that's very rare, and that's not, you're not going to basically, you're going to say, the stricter thing is really that the shoel always has to pay immediately the value of the item. That's obviously more strict than in a unique case, a shomer sachar will have to pay double. And therefore, that's why it's a kavah chomer that has no difficulty. You can't knock it down because that's not a real good knockdown. Okay? And therefore, Rav Yosef says that's not a question on my theory that a list in Mizuyan is like a ganav in there and incurs a kefil payment. Now we're going to try to bring a proof for this line of the list in Mizuyan is like a ganav. Lema mesayele. Let's try to say that this source could support. Hasochir para mechavero v'nigniva. I rent a para, okay, I rent a cow from you, and it gets stolen. V'amar hala, now, okay, let's say I rent your car from you, okay, and it gets stolen. V'amar hala, now instead of getting into a whole thing with you, and I could go to court and I could say, okay, according to this, we're going to assume, because it says, let me read it. Amar hala, hareini mishalem ve'eni nishba. I say, listen, I'm going to just pay you the value of your car, and I'm not going to take an oath. Okay, maybe better with a bicycle, right? A car is a lot of money. But let's say I borrow your bicycle, and I rent your bicycle from you, and it breaks. And I say, instead of getting into, look, I don't want to go to court and take an oath. I'd rather not bother. I don't like to take oaths, maybe, right? People don't like to take oaths. We've learned all about that. I'll just pay you the money, okay? And be done with it, even though it really got stolen from me. So I pay the money. Now what happens is, achar kach nimtza ganav. Then the ganav is found. Mishalem tashlume kefel lasochir. So now we pay. Now what happens? In the end, we find the thief. Who does he pay Now he returns the item and pays the kefel payment to who? To me. Why? Because I already gave you the value of the item, even though I didn't need to. I could have taken an oath. With that payment, I acquire rights to it. So if the ganav is found, he'll pay me the kefel. Okay, so now, what does this have to do with anything? Well, remember what happens here. There's an assumption that I could get out of paying by taking an oath, right? Right now, what would you tell me? What are we talking about here? A socher. Now, there's a whole machloket about a socher. Is it like a shomer chinam or a shomer sachar? Remember that we saw machloket Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and there was a machloket about who said what. Okay, and we're going to get back to that now. But right now, you would assume this is talking about a shomer chinam because a shomer chinam can exempt themselves from payment for gneva by taking an oath, because this assumes you could have taken an oath and you didn't. But Savrua, they thought that for some reason, people assumed, there was a rumor going around, I don't know, that this source was Rabbi Yehuda. Now, they thought it was Rabbi Yehuda who said nosei sachar. Now, if you're nosei sachar, which is a shomer sachar, midikatani hareini mishalem ve'eni nishba, michlal di'ipai patra le'nafshe b'shvua, right? The assumption of this source, if we're going with, this is Rabbi Yehuda, and it's talking about a shomer sachar, sounds like there's a way to exempt yourself from payment for theft and pay nothing, and then later get the kefal payment in a shomer sachar case. But how could that be? Shomer sachar can't exempt themselves from payment for a theft, except unless you say Rav Yosef, which is hechidami kigon ditan tanat listim mizuyan. If you had claimed that I rented your bike, and then I claimed robbers came, put a gun to my head, forced me to give them the bike, even if a socher is like a shomer sachar, according to Rav Yosef, I would be exempt from payment, and then I would also get kefel if we eventually find the guys who armed robbed me, right? They would have to pay me kefel because that's his whole unique approach here. That was his answer. That listen, since they later hide, or since maybe at the time they covered their faces with a face mask, therefore they're considered like a ganav who does it secretly, and they do incur the kefel payment. So, so because now this is all premised on that they thought it was Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, and Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is it's like a shomer sachar, okay? And then the only way to explain it, and that would be Rav Yosef, and that's a nice proof. But we're going to have three ways to reject this. Number one, maybe their assumption that Rabbi Yehuda was just wrong. Dilma, right? It would go the simple way. Dilma Rabbi Meir desfirale damar socher kashomer chinam dami. Maybe this Braita is actually like Rabbi Meir, who holds it to shomer chinam, and they were just wrong in thinking it was Rabbi Yehuda. And then if you say shomer chinam, then it's just talking about regular geneva. It makes a lot more sense. Second option is going to be similar, except they're going to do it the other way, which is Ibayit Ema Kedemachlif Rava Avatani. They held it was like Rabbi Yehuda, but the way Rabba bar Avua thinks Rabbi Yehuda holds, as I said, there's flip here. So Cher Ketzam Mishalem, according to him, he flipped the opinions. Rabbi Meir Omer Kashomer Sachal, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kashomer Chinam. So then we have, oh no, it is Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Yehuda holds the Shomer Chinam position, and then it teaches them nothing about Shomer Sachar and can't be used as a proof. Rabbi Zera has a different way of resolving it. Let's say it's Rabbi Yehuda. And let's say it's Rabbi Yehuda who says it's Shomer Sachar. It still doesn't prove your case. Why not? Because he says it could be an even more unique case. Hacha b'mayaskinan, b'to'en ta'anat listim mizuyan, v'nimtza listim she'eno mizuyan. Maybe I came to you and claimed I was a Shomer Sachar, and I wanted to get out of paying. I know I'm liable for theft. So what do? I claim that it was listim mizuyan, that it was armed robbery. It was stolen from me by armed robbers, which means I pay nothing. Okay, but then it turns out it was listim she'ena mizuyan. But then it turned out that they were robbers that weren't armed. And then it turns out, right, that then that's the reason why I'm going to incur the kefal payment. Because I was a shomer sachal, it was listim, I claimed listim mizuyan, and therefore, what was the whole problem? If I'm a shomer sachar and I claim geneva, how can I get out of it? But here I claimed a claim that wasn't true, but that got me exempt. Since I was exempt, then in the end, there's a kefal, right? Then in the end, they paid, I'm sorry, 1 second. No, it really was stolen, but right, I didn't want to pay, so I claimed it was stolen, listim mizuyan, that it was armed robbery, so that I would get out of paying. And that basically bought me the rights to get the kefal payment. Okay, and then it turns out it was just stolen regular, like a regular geneva. It says listim she'ena mizuyan, but it really would have to mean a regular geneva, because then they paid me kefal payment. So I lied about it and paid nothing. Now, if I had paid already, then there would be the kefal wouldn't go to me, because then I was liable to pay. I don't gain any rights. In this case, I didn't have to pay because I could have, again, I did, but I lied about it. And it was as if I didn't have to pay. So I took it, right? Now, again, what happened? Instead of taking, okay, it's actually a little more tricky than that. I have to say it better. I claimed that I didn't have to take the oath and I didn't have to pay, but I paid, meaning I claimed that it was a case where I didn't have to pay, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay. And then I paid the money, and with paying the money in that way, I bought the rights to the kefal. Okay. But it wasn't really, it was listim she'ena mizuyan. And then that doesn't teach you anything about listim mizuyan. Because about this kefal payment at all.
אני גם מדריכת אופניים עכשיו לילדים.
When I went back on, it didn't mute everyone. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so that's a third way of explaining it. Okay, and now, and again, because I paid it in a way that I wasn't liable, I didn't have to pay, even though I did, but I lied about it. I gained the rights to the kefil. That's the basic assumption here. And then this has nothing to do, listing mizuyan doesn't generally have kefil associated with it, but this wasn't a kefil case. It wasn't a listing mizuyan case. It wasn't really a case. It was just I claimed that way. Okay, last thing for today. Naflan legina v'nehanek mishalemet mashanene. Now we're back to the Mishnah. We finished this whole long sugya. Maybe I'll just quickly review the sugya. We had Raba and Rav Yosef, two different approaches about a shomer avodah, what your level of shmirah is. We had two questions against Raba, two questions against Rav Yosef. When we answered the second question against Rav Yosef, it was based on this assumption that a list of mizuyan incurs a kefil payment. It's like a ganav in a certain way. Okay, it's not because it's ones, but it's like a ganav in the sense that there's, right, if you claim it, it's ones for shmirah, but in terms of payment, you actually incur kefil payment. Both if you armed robbery, you would have to pay kefil, and if you claim it, you also have to, right, you would also then have to pay the kefil. So now we had two difficulties with that assumption and one attempt to prove it, but all of those were rejected. Now we go back to the Mishnah. Ruth's animal falls in by accident to Naomi's field. And nehanate benefits there. Now, there's two ways she could benefit. Either she falls on the ground, ruins the crops of Naomi's, but because she fell on the crops, it gave her a soft landing and didn't get hurt on the way down. That's benefit. Or she could fall down and then say, "Oh, food right near. Ah, great, I'll eat it and benefit from eating." We don't know which case yet. It's going to be the Gemara's question. Mishalemet masha nehanate. So she's not exempt from payment. But she doesn't have to pay. There's a scale. You could be exempt. You could have to pay all the damages, whatever was destroyed. Or you could be in the middle, which is just the benefit. Now, what does that mean, just the benefit? Well, let's say she ruins the crops because she fell and had this soft landing. So you would have to pay. The Meiri says you would assess how much you'd be willing to pay for this kind of benefit so that your animal wouldn't get hurt on the way down. Rabbi Yonatan Lumil says we assess how much straw it would cost to do a soft landing. And even though this wasn't straw, this was much more expensive than straw, but we go by the most minimal thing that you could have used, and that amount that you would have needed for the animal to have had a soft landing, that's what you would pay. Okay, and if it's food, it would be whatever food you don't have to feed them, right, based on some basic food for animals. So now, Amarat benechbeta. Rav says this is talking about the impact issue, the fact that it was a softened landing. Avalachla, but it sounds like he's saying, but if you ate it, afilu mashaneneit ena mishalemet. Even what she benefits from, she wouldn't have to pay. Okay, it would sound like if the animal ate, you're not responsible at all because the animal fell in there by onus, and the assumption is the animal will eat, and therefore, it's not your fault. So, or maybe we don't expect the animal. We'll talk about this in a minute, but for some reason you wouldn't have to pay because Rav says it's only impact. To which the Gemara says, Lema Rav l'tameh. Maybe Rav is consistent with what he says elsewhere. To Amar Rav, in a totally different case. And in a minute, we're going to say these are totally not comparable. But right now, they think to compare them. That in a case where you bring your fruits into someone else's field and the animal eats them and gets sick from them, you're not liable. Why? What did Rav say? Hayala shelo tochal. You could say, I'm not paying for the fact that your animal got sick from eating my food. Who told you your animal to eat my food? So here also, I can say, or Ruth can say as the owner of that animal, my animal fell over. Number one, it was by onus. Number two, Rashi says it well. What was I supposed to do? The animal shouldn't have eaten. The fact that the animal ate it's not my fault. Animal shouldn't have eaten. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Amre, you can't use that claim here. Hashta imur d'amarav hatam hayala shelo tochal hechad itzaki. When we said there, she shouldn't have eaten. That's when the animal got damaged by the food. And Naomi is the owner of the field says, hey, Ruth, what was your animal doing eating my food? You can't blame me for it. The owner of the fruit could say, Ruth can say, Naomi can say it. Naomi's the owner of the field could say, well, what were you doing eating my fruits? But in this case, Ruth's animal destroyed something in Naomi's property. That's a totally different story. L'shalumimi, right? Deptira l'shalumimi amar. Can't possibly say, oh, you're exempt from payment because my animal shouldn't have eaten. That's a totally different claim. So we're left with a question on Rav, and in the beginning of tomorrow's daf, we'll see that that's not what Rav meant. Rav meant it's both the impact and the eating of the food. Okay, so that's this section. I'm not going to bother reviewing because we just learned it. And that's it for today. Wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom, hopefully a peaceful weekend.